celebrating 17 years of possibility. Pilot Flying J and Halloran Hilton Hill present Anything is Possible. Today's guest, Bill Walker, Part 1.
Bill Walker, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
You have had such an incredible life, and music and life have intertwined to give you I would imagine, the life of your dreams.
It's what I wanted, what I planned for.
So let's start back at the very, very beginning of your life. Sydney, Australia.
On a dairy farm.
On a dairy farm. Talk to me about growing up in Sydney.
Well, it was an experience. It was wonderful. It was during the Depression. I was born in 1927, and we went through the Depression years, but we had our own dairy and we served a lot of customers, and we even bartered with some of them. We gave them milk and they gave us food. And that's how we got through to the 1930s.
My mother was born in 1927, and she would tell me stories of the Great Depression. Imagine an era in the world and in America that is defined by the word depression.
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, living through that in and of itself is great. Tell me about your parents.
My parents were people, just ordinary folk that grew up in the Depression. My dad came from a farm in a place called Bouillon in northern New South Wales. And he grew up on a dairy farm the same as I did. Then they moved to Sydney, and my grandfather, who was a first-generation Australian, he came from England, from Oxford, England. Right. He was an immigrant, and Dad was a first generation. I was second. And we battled through, and I decided that I loved music. When I turned 6 or 7, I used to play little tunes on the piano, and I just knew that's what I wanted to do, but Dad had different plans for me. He had plans to send me to agricultural school, and he was buying other farms and doing a bunch of stuff, but I just had my mind set on music. I knew what I wanted to do.
What happened when you were 6 or 7? Did you have a musical moment that unleashed that passion, that desire?
I don't know. I just know that that's what I wanted. That's all I knew.
Did you hear something?
Yeah, I listened to that. We had a radio, and a little radio that we used to have to work a hair spring.
Like a crystal radio.
Like a crystal. So I'd get it one where the music was playing, and I'd listen to it. And then my grandfather, who came from England, bought me a little wind-up record player, and he bought me Handel's Messiah. And that was my first interview of classical music, and I loved it. And between milking times, I'd played that record, and between going to school and trying to fiddle with the piano, and then Mum decided she'd have me taught piano. And I was glad she decided that. And she sent me to a local teacher who taught me scales and various things, very basic stuff. But she told my mother that when I'd been with her for a year, she said, he's trying to teach me. So she moved me to another class. And I went through several years of learning. And then I went to a well-known teacher. And then I decided that I wanted to go to the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, for which I needed a special exam that you had to have. And I'd left school in my fifth year of school, in high school, and I had to go back to a night school and take the courses to pass to get my entrance to the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, which was part of Sydney University. I studied there for 4 or 5 years, for actually 6 years, and I got what is equivalent to a master's degree here.
Let's take a break. This is, may I call you the legendary Bill Walker?
If you will.
And he is an example of possibility. More in a moment.
Possibility powered by Pilot Flying J, Covenant Health, Home Federal, and the Knoxville News Sentinel. Coming up,
Make the World Go Away.
That was my first gold record.
That's your first gold record.
Well, Eddie and I picked that song out of about a dozen songs, and I wrote the arrangement for it. And Floyd Kramer played piano on that, as a matter of fact.
It seems like to me, just based on just what you told us prior, and this is Bill Walker, that I always tell people when it comes to music, there are people who are technicians, and then there are people who are really inspired. It comes from something deep inside them. There is a driving force that they can't even explain. And I feel that in you because you sound like you were compelled or drawn, like, I have to do music. Yeah. So I want to look at the two sides of that, because you said in between milking cows, you were listening to music, and then you started taking piano lessons, and then you started trying to teach the teacher, and then you earn your way into the conservatory. But music must have done and must do something to you and for you. What was music doing to you, and what was it doing for you during those formative years?
I think the word satisfaction comes into mind. It gave me satisfaction. It gave me, I wasn't over thrilled with anything in particular, but I was satisfied. Things were happening and things were directing the way. I was meeting other peoples in the music business, and we were forming bands and doing different things and playing different club jobs, playing record dates, because the American musician strike was on, and so it fell to a lot of locals. We got a chance to actually do recordings that we'd never had before because there was nothing coming in from America.
And at that point in the 40s and 50s, American music was really swinging. I mean, it was swinging.
And I had a job with the American Red Cross, the boys that were on leave. I'd go in after school of an afternoon and play for an hour and a half, and they gave me all the, what they called V-discs. Ooh. And I got all my Benny Goodman and Artie Shaw and Glenn Miller records. I had a stack of them. They'd give them to me. And I'd say, look, I like that one of Glenn Miller. And they'd say, yeah, it's yours, take it. We've got 2 or 3 of it. And
so did you study those? Did you listen and listen?
I did, and I wrote arrangements off them. I copied the arrangements.
So if I mention a name like Count Basie, or if I mention a name like Duke Ellington.
Wonderful people.
Or if I mention Billy Strayhorn.
Know them all.
You know them all.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience embracing that music.
Well, we had jazz clubs. We used to, Sunday night I used to sneak out of church. And I'd go before church, because church always went late on Sunday night. But I wanted to go to a place called the Parisian, which was up Campsie, which is a suburb of Sydney. And they had a jazz club there every Sunday night. It started at 7 o'clock. Well, church didn't get out till 7:30 quarter to 8, so I used to pretend to go to the back of the church, and then I'd leave. And I'd go to the Parisian, and I'd sit in with the band, and other people would sit in, we'd all play, and we'd learn stuff, and we'd learn about embellishment and how to play jazz or how to love jazz. And
improvise.
It was just an exciting time.
When it comes to pianists, and we'll see if we share the same enthusiasms here, there are a couple of pianists that just rocked my world. I don't play well at all.
Tell me.
Number 1, Art Tatum.
Wonderful blind pianist.
Yeah, just
wonderful pianist. Technique was just amazing.
Flawless. Yeah. Number 2, Oscar Peterson.
Wonderful. And the strange part about it was that Floyd Kramer would sell 10 times the number of records that Oscar Peterson. But Oscar Peterson was a jewel.
I mean, he just was.
And you know, a great pianist that nobody recognized a lot was Nat King Cole.
He was a splendid. Some say he was a better pianist than singer.
Well, he was an equal anyway. I mean, I love his record of Just Found Joy, I'm as happy as a baby boy. Sweet Lorraine. It was, and he sang and played that with his little group, piano, bass, drums, and a guitar, I think, played some background rhythm.
So you're embracing all of music, from classical to bebop to swing. You're embracing all this music.
As it turns out, I needed that for when I was transferred to South Africa.
Right. So you were in Sydney, and then you moved to South Africa.
Well, RCA offered me a job to be the music director of their A&R department there.
Which record company?
RCA Victor.
RCA. Okay. So now you moved to South Africa, and now you're A&R.
Yeah, I'm suddenly a big shot. And I didn't treat it like that. I treated it like a blessing. And I just enjoyed it very much, and I learnt so much about other types of music. I've got my first taste of country music there. I'd never heard of some of the country artists like the Jim Reeveses and the Eddie Arnolds and those people. I hadn't heard of them in Australia. And I became aware of Johnny Cash and Elvis Presley and people like that.
What was your first reaction to country music?
It was a little bit below me, I thought. And then I realized how wrong I was, that it satisfied a yen to a lot of people.
Oh my gosh. Country music is in much the same way blues connects at a soul level. Country music well done, it moves past your ears to your heart very rapidly.
Amen.
Right?
Yeah, I believe the same thing.
Because when I heard, and I don't want to get ahead of myself in the interview, but when I heard Make the World Go Away.
That was my first gold record.
That's your first gold record. When I heard Eddie Arnold and I heard the song, first, your production of that, his performance of that, transcendent. I mean, and because I've always felt this way, Bill, about production. If you listen to a record or a recording and you go, who produced that? We missed, right? Great production is you feel it first. You go, oh my God, that means something to me.
Well, Eddie and I picked that song out of about a dozen songs.
Really?
And I wrote the arrangement for it. And Floyd Kramer played piano on that, as a matter of fact. I conducted the orchestra.
I mean, it's spectacular. But the first time that I heard that song, as a songwriter, and then just as a fan of music, I don't care the genre. What I care about is the spirit. It hit me. I felt it because it was real. It was a real human story, a real human experience. And I guess that's what country music, how it connected with you as well.
Yes, and part of my job was to cover records that were on other labels and beat them out in the European market. And CBS and other Decca, other labels, they were doing the same thing. They were covering stuff on RCA. That's how I got mixed up with Jim Reeves.
Tell me about that.
Part of my job in Africa was to put the RCA studio orchestra with American visiting artists that were on RCA. And so I just got a copy of From a Jack to a King, which Ned Miller had a big hit here. And I got word from New York. They said, see if you can get Jim Reeves to record this and get it out. We want to beat the Ned Miller record out in Europe. So I went to Jim and I said, he was there to do a movie. And I was to write the score for the movie, which I did. But I said, Jim, would you like to go in the studio and record From a Jack to a King? He was familiar with the song. And I said, we've got to beat the Ned Miller record out. He said, yeah, let's go do it. So I put a small group together and we went in the studio and recorded it. And I put it out within a week. And then I sent it to Athens, to Rome, to Barcelona, to Switzerland, Geneva, Amsterdam, and London. And we hit the markets with it, and it absolutely wiped out any future records. He had a gold record within about 6 days. Well, wow. He thought I was the best thing since toilet paper.
I would too.
So I did well with that, and that was the start of a pretty good relationship with Jim Reeves and myself.
And back then, when you worked with an orchestra, first of all, just working with great live musicians is
the
incredible.
Best thing.
But the arrangements have to be exquisite. And
well, I got lucky there.
The folks from your generation could get a phone call from a New York with that directive, and then grab paper and just write it. I mean,
That's exactly
you could
right.
hear it all in your head. When did you get to that place where you could hear it in your head before you put it on the page?
I could do that when I was in high school.
Really?
I really could, and I knew what it was going to sound like, but most times I never got to hear it. I'd write some things for other orchestras, and they'd take it and play it, and I'd never hear it, but I knew what it was going to sound like.
What a gift. Let's take a break. Bill Walker is my guest. Are we having a good time or what? This is fantastic. More in a moment.
Coming up,
The A&R director of New York was there, and he said, "Bill, you better go on down to Nashville. Jim Reeves' plane is missing." I get to Nashville, and of course, they'd found his plane by that time.
So you get to South Africa. You're an A&R guy. You're a big guy.
Yeah.
You don't have to sneak out of church anymore. You're the boss.
No,
right?
that's why I didn't have to sneak out of church.
You meet Jim Reeves. You get him a gold record in 5 or 6 days.
And write the score for his movie.
You write the score for his movie, right? You're blowing and going. How old are you at about this time?
Well, I was there for 7 years. I went there when I was 30 or 29, and I stayed 7 years, so I was about 35.
Wow. So you were just doing it.
I was really happy, and I was making records. I had 23 albums of my own, piano albums.
23.
And they were very well accepted, fortunately, and I was quite a well-known name in South Africa.
Wow. I'm trying to figure out now how we get you to America. You got this 7-year run in South Africa. How'd you get to America?
Well, Jim Reeves had signed a contract with NBC, I think it was, to do an hour variety show once a week on television to go up against Jimmy Dean's 1 hour show on ABC. But at that time in Nashville, you couldn't just do an hour television show on national TV and only have country artists. Of course, a lot of them were just sort of hillbilly artists, and as good as they were in what they did, it wasn't what sold on television. So they had to have an artist from Las Vegas, from New York, from Los Angeles, well-known artists like Perry Como and people like that. And then they could mix that, and they're gradually infiltrating the urban market. But he didn't have anybody that could do the arrangements for and satisfy those artists, apart from the country artists. So I sort of fitted the bill.
You could do it all.
Luckily.
All of that music that you
God
learned.
was very good to me. He
Yeah.
gave me that extra bit of talent that I needed for that. So Jim offered me the job. He said, "Look, I'm going to," and it looks like a 4-year contract. He said, "Would you be prepared to leave RCA and come and work with me? And particularly just to do the show?" And I said, "Well, I'll have to think about it," because I was doing too good in Africa, but I wanted to get to the States. So he went back to America after we finished, and he kept transatlantic calls going. And anyway, finally I decided that, okay, I'd do it. And so I left RCA, gave them notice, and went through all the ropes of getting my entrance to America. I had to have exams, like health exams, police exams. I had to have all this paperwork of where I'd lived in Australia and Africa and England and so forth. And so got all that fixed up, and I went to London, got my papers, got to the States, and I'd been conducting The Sound of Music for 8 months, 8 shows a week. So I wanted to see the American version. I was doing the British touring company in Johannesburg. And so I went to see the show. The RCA got me tickets, and off I went. And I come out, and they said, the A&R director of New York was there, and he said, "Bill, you better go on down to Nashville. Jim Reeves' plane is missing." So I get to Nashville, and of course they'd found his plane by that time. He died that day, he and his piano player. So suddenly I didn't have a job, and much to the horror, but that was nothing compared with the loss his family had. So I offered him my job back in Africa, and I said, no, I'm here now, and I've got a Musicians Union card and a green card. I said, I'm staying. So I did, and I played with some pretty bad bands for that first 6 or 7 months, but I took anything where I could get a job and get paid.
Really?
It was mostly dance jobs at country clubs with the sort of orchestras that played in those things. Some of them were very good, some of them were very bad.
How'd you push through that? Because you're a musician at this level, and now you're in America and you're scrapping at this level.
Yeah, I was way down there, and I just had to put up with it. I prayed a lot, and things were very good. And then Eddie Arnold came along, and Chet Atkins, who was a big help to me, actually. I toured with him and Floyd Kramer when they did their African tour from Nairobi to Cape Town. I took the RCA Orchestra, and so I got to know them pretty well.
Let's take another break. When we come back, I want to talk about meeting Eddie Arnold and your career in America starting to emerge, but I also want to talk to you about your faith.
Okay.
This is Anything is Possible.